Do you love Star Wars villains and the Inquisitors that have appeared in shows like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Rebels? Read about a Jedi's journey to the dark side in the new novel Star Wars, Inquisitor, Rise of the Red Blade, from New York Times bestselling author Delilah S. Dawson. When the Jedi Order falls, an Inquisitor rises. Padawan Iskata Karis has dedicated her life to traveling the galaxy alongside her master, learning the ways of the Force to become a good Jedi. As the years pass and the Clone Wars engulf the galaxy in chaos, her faith in the Jedi wanes. When the Jedi Order finally falls, Iskat seizes the chance to forge a path of her own. She embraces the salvation of Order 66, and with each strike of her red blade, Iskat moves closer to claiming her new destiny in the Force, whatever the cost. You can enter for the chance to win a free copy of Inquisitor, Rise of the Red Blade at readstarwars.com/redbladepodcast. Star Wars Inquisitor, Rise of the Red Blade is available for purchase wherever books are sold.
Hello?
Hey.
I don't know what happened, but it's good now.
Okay. You know what it is? The USB wires are so fucking flimsy.
Yeah, and I'm literally just holding it. It's fine.
I mean,
I'll just be really still.
Okay. And we'll let you know if it cuts out.
Okay.
All right, well, let's just start it. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Nerd Soup Podcast. I am Anthony J.Q. Nash, doing my best Bo Oliver impression, joined here today with Aaron, the Nerd Soup Monkey, and Marissa, and we are here to talk about Oppenheimer and Barbie, also known as Barbenheimer Weekend. I think that most people would consider it a success when you look at the box office numbers for both movies and the critical scores. A lot of people having fun with both movies for different reasons and for similar reasons that I think were unexpected. But I'm excited to be here with you guys to talk about these movies. And of course, for you guys listening at home, you can listen to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts or right here on YouTube. And follow us on social medias at Nerd Soup and follow our personals at Nerd Soup Monkey, at Purple Girl NS, at Anthony JQ Nash, and at Bo Soup. Give him a follow. Not Teddy, though, because I'm actually in a fight with Teddy. I don't like Teddy anymore.
I never liked him.
Yeah, I think we all knew that. How you guys doing?
Good.
Yeah, can't complain. Barbenheimer was a success, even though you kind of left me out to dry last minute. I still made it work. It does suck that you got COVID. That's like the worst possible
Yeah, that's real tough. Birthday, Barbenheimer.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, Marissa, it sucks for him, obviously, but think about me. Having to have this whole day in my mind planned out and then just having to go into the city by myself. I'm really...
Oh, you went into the city?
Yeah, Lincoln Center. Had to get that 70mm IMAX. But it was kind of sick being the only person in the theater with an empty seat next to me. I was lounging.
You could put your popcorn on that one instead of knocking over a little girl's.
So, what's happening with the Venmo for that ticket? Should I send you a request? Should I ask your mom? Is she going to compensate me?
I'll comp it on the, go through the proper channels. I don't know how that works.
Okay.
And
just throwing salt in the wound. Not only did I miss out on the experience, but I also lost out on $150.
$150. And I paid for your Barbie ticket, which I ended up going to. Probably me and 3 other guys. The rest was just a bunch of women in pink. And it was kind of awesome. One of the most electric theaters I've ever been into. It was like Endgame. But yeah, successful for me. I do feel bad, though. Now you have to wait 3 weeks to see it in Lincoln Center, right? Because that's been sold out.
Is it keeping you up at night?
It is, actually. I want my friends to have good times, good memories, especially when it comes to movies. But, I persevered, and I'm glad I made out of it alive. What if I got lost? I think I know the subway systems.
Well, that was the only good thing about missing it, is not having to travel into Brooklyn, because that was still a wild decision by you. But hey, I got sick. I didn't have to experience it. So
you said Alamo, and there's 2 Alamos, but the one in the city is tiny and sold out. I improvised. I'm the great improviser. Something me and Oppenheimer have in common.
Marissa, how was your experience watching these 2 movies?
It was actually pretty good. I saw Oppenheimer Saturday morning, a nice 10:30 a.m. showing, because that movie is 3 hours long. And it was actually very funny because it was the first movie of the day for the theater that we went to. And so mad people in pink because they were seeing Barbie immediately afterwards. And we saw it in IMAX, which I know it's not true IMAX, but it was the closest we could get to IMAX out here. But I really enjoyed it. More than I was expecting. I was seeing Oppenheimer kind of for the Barbieheimer thing, the whole Barbieheimer of it all. Even though I do like Christopher Nolan, and so I was interested to see. I was like, it'll probably be good because it's Christopher Nolan, and I was like blown away by it.
I enjoyed both of them going into it. Like all the hype surrounding the whole Barbenheimer thing was kind of a lot to put on like these two movies, but I think both delivered in their own ways. Two different movies, obviously, but I had a great time. And I mean, the box office showing the public reaction to both of the movies, it really was like probably all in all one of the more successful weekends for theaters in a while. I kept seeing people, and I forget that people just wear pink just in general. And I was in the city all weekend, and I just kept seeing people just dressed in pink, and I'm like, oh, they're probably good. They're just seeing Barbie, not like realizing like, oh no, they're just probably like wearing clothes. Like it's just the normal color for people to wear. But in my head, everyone was going to see Barbie.
Yeah, I feel like it's still kind of opening weekend, but I still see I saw Barbie today, literally a few hours ago. Still a ton of people dressed in pink in my theater that I saw in general as we left. I know it's only Monday as we're recording this anyway. Or, I'm sorry, it's Tuesday. But it's still, I feel like, holding pretty strong. I would say though, I liked Oppenheimer more than I liked Barbie, but I also had two completely different expectations for both movies. And I had a great time watching Barbie and was horrifically depressed during Oppenheimer. So,
well, yeah, like we said before, like the Lincoln Center IMAX is booked for like the next 3 weeks, and even the ones around here, I was looking locally to go see it again. They're still packed. So,
no, yeah, he's my brother. I went with my brother, and he bought the tickets literally, I don't know, weeks ago. I got a text that was like, do you want to see Oppenheimer on this day? And I was like, sure, because I didn't think I was going to record the podcast about it.
That's why you always got to be prepared.
I mean, if you guys want to pay for my movie ticket, sure.
He just asked me to Venmo him for my Oppenheimer seat. We're shelling out tickets for Marissa. We don't even pay to give Teddy tickets. Well, yeah, and the box offices reflect all that, I think. I mean, Greta Gerwig opened up to, I think, the highest box office for a female director. And Oppenheimer, for an R-rated 3-hour history lesson, is absolutely doing tremendous numbers. I think his highest non-Dark Knight trilogy. So, Barbenheimer's real.
Especially because Tenet got so messed up by the COVID release and the streaming and all of that. So, during Oppenheimer, when he literally says, the fact that they call him Oppie in the movie, I thought people were just calling him Oppie as a joke. And then the movie, they hit me with the Oppie, and I was like, oh my God. When he goes, you can't keep a good man down, I was like, Oppie? Is this for real?
Nah, Oppenheimer had bars.
It was like he had time to cheat on his wife and also create the atomic bomb.
Well, I'd say that we start with Barbie first, and then we'll go into Oppenheimer, because I know people have been arguing back and forth what's the best way to watch both of them, but that seems to be the preferred way. So start with the light stuff.
People are doing Barbie, then Oppenheimer? Interesting.
Yeah, I did Oppenheimer, then Barbie. I think that was the right way to do it.
Yeah, I feel like Oppenheimer Barbie is the better way to do it.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that.
We can start with Barbie, though.
Hey, Barbie. Can I come to your house tonight?
Sure. I don't have anything big planned, just a giant blowout party with all the Barbies and planned choreography and a bespoke song. You should stop by.
So cool.
I mean, I don't want to act like Oppenheimer was... I mean, I do think Oppenheimer was the better movie. Comparing them is sort of ridiculous. They're just going to be linked forever because of all the memes. But it does seem like Barbie's just... There's not as much to talk about with Barbie than with Oppenheimer. And that's because Oppenheimer is just a bigger, more ambitious movie. Both are very ambitious, but we'll start light. We'll start with Barbie. Greta Gerwig's Barbie. One of my most anticipated movies of the year because of just how weird I expected it to be. And it was definitely weird in spots, but I also found it to be very safe. But still have to commend Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, the writing team there, for how far they were able to stretch the creative rubber band of what a big budgeted IP studio movie could be. And you could see that in some spots they did have to kind of scale it back and go back to the old cliches of how these movies are supposed to go. But I thought that what really made up for some of its lack of weirdness was the comedy. I was laughing throughout. It was fucking hilarious. Everyone's been not overhyping, but really hyping up Ryan Gosling. I thought maybe there was going to be some overhype going into it because the first half of the movie, I'm like, he's fine. But it got to a point where everything he said and every mannerism or every choice he made as an actor was fucking hysterical. You couldn't even hear the movie at some points in my theater because people were just laughing at everything he said. I feel like some of the characters, they left some meat on the bone, especially for the character of America Ferrara. I felt like her character definitely could have been more of the focus of the film, and maybe that would have made it stronger. But it is funny to me how I think the two most memorable performances come from two of the guys, which is fine because sometimes it's like you have something that's working well and you're going to dive into that. And I think that's what Gerwig and Baumbach did with the character of Ken, where you can argue he basically becomes the main character of the film by the end.
I really enjoyed Barbie. I had a good time watching it. It looked great. It brought me back to, I was a very classically, like, I loved Barbie when I was a kid. I loved dolls. I loved all of that. And it was just so much fun to see how hard they went on committing to, like, the toy aesthetic in all of the sets in Barbie Land. It was so uncanny. Like, how the fact that there's no water, so she didn't know how to, like, drink properly because it's like nothing's real. Because it's very much mimicking the way that children play with toys. Again, from all the trailers, I knew that Barbie was going to go to the real world, but I didn't know exactly what to expect from this movie in general. I tried not to like watch every single trailer. I didn't want to have too much of it spoiled for me, but it was pretty obvious she was going to go to the real world. And I was actually surprised how quickly they just went back to Barbie Land. And also,
I liked the Barbie Land stuff, so I was like kind of happy when they did.
No, yeah, I really liked the Barbie Land stuff. I was just surprised. I had expected more of the movie to take place in the real world. But I'm also like, it's like a double-edged sword, right? Like, I was a little disappointed they went back to Barbie Land so quickly. But I also, if we only got like the 20 minutes of Barbie Land in the beginning, I would have been sad. So I don't know exactly what they could have done there, to be honest. But in terms of Gloria, who is America Ferrera's character, and her daughter, I was actually expecting them to have more of a focus in the movie than they did. At the very least, the angle that Gloria is the one who's been playing with classic, stereotypical Barbie, and it's her having this identity crisis which leaks into Barbie's life. I felt like there was more they could have bit into there, like Bo said, and we didn't quite get it. And I just wish that we had gotten that bit. And I think part of my issue with the return to Barbie Land so soon is that we don't see any of Gloria's life beyond her job in the real world. And, the Duolingo joke about her husband. I don't know. If we saw more of her identity crisis in the real world, I think it could have really added something to this movie. I don't know. I'm having difficulty trying to create a coherent thought there.
No, I think that's fair. And I do think some of the story points weren't the strongest aspect of it, but in terms of the movie as a whole, I just thought it was a lot of fun. I was probably the most I've laughed in a theater. And like I said before, I just had a great theater to go see this movie in with. So it was just a lot of fun throughout. And yeah, I think the Barbie Land stuff was just the aesthetic of it, the way, like you said, they were able to incorporate some of the characteristics of a toy into that world, but make it a little bit more real life. I thought was pretty funny and smart. The water not being an actual beach and the milk being spoiled when there's nothing in it, stuff like that I really enjoyed. And yeah, I heard a lot of the, how Ryan Gosling is going to be nominated for an Oscar and all this stuff. And, I was expecting him to be good, but I thought he was incredible. You could just tell, just how natural being that character was for him. And it really made the Ken character just a blast every time he was on screen, because even compare him to someone like Simu Liu, who I thought was good as Ken, but there was just a clear levels to, I guess, being a Ken, because everything was just so natural, and I think that's just what made his character so funny. And it's good seeing him back in a comedic role, because I think he nails it every time. I do agree with you with some of the real world aspects of it, that we could have spent more time there kind of establishing and differentiating between the two worlds, because I think especially when, the main story is Barbie trying to figure out, realize who she is and kind of comparing that to what she knows to what's really going on. I think there really wasn't a lot there for the audience and the character to kind of help differentiate between the two. But other than that, I think it was just, like I said, just a lot of fun. And there were multiple parts when I was just like absolutely belly laughing to the point where you really couldn't hear the next line in the movie because my theater was just dying laughing.
Yeah, I think Ryan Gosling's commitment to being Ken. I mean, we've seen it so much in all of the press they did that before the strike. Yeah, like he was Ken. The song, the interpretive dances, all his facial expressions. Like the mugshots became a meme before the movie was even out, but I still laughed just as hard seeing it in the movie.
He puts the glasses on, already pair of glasses. It's such a little like visual gag, but I thought that was so fucking funny.
And his like just utter delight at like discovering the patriarchy.
Well, yeah, I saw.
And he's just like, I'm respected here. And he's just like, and him walking into the hospital and the other like building and being like, well, I'm a man, so I can just get a job here. This is how it works here, right?
Yeah, I think it was funny because you saw people obviously before the movie come out like complaining. It's like, oh, they used the patriarchy unironically, like, but that was like part of the joke, him not really fully grasping what that word means, and him just keeps saying it to make it sound like he knows what's going on. And I think that's just
he thinks it's horses.
yeah, and that's just perfect.
Ken is the horse girl.
Pretty much. But like a lot of I thought the comedy was actually like really smart at times too. It wasn't just stuff like that, but when they when they break the fourth wall, kind of, when they talk about like the actual discontinued Barbies and when they have the depressed Barbie cutaway, I thought was fucking hilarious. Even when Helen Mirren chimes in and breaks the fourth wall and saying like, yeah, casting Margot Robbie in this role doesn't really make it that convincing, what she's saying. Like, I just thought that was really clever and smart, and it just kept me laughing throughout. What was the other one? Oh yeah, when they're in the real world and they point to the Miss America billboard and they're like, oh, it's the Supreme Court.
Yeah, that one was funny. Yeah, there was just, it was like, I had such a good time watching this movie. I will say though, I did go also see this with my mom and my 12-year-old sister, and some of it flew right over my sister's head.
Yeah, had to play.
She at the end, she did ask me what a gynecologist is. So that was a fun conversation to have immediately after the movie.
Yeah, it was definitely made for adults more so than kids, but a lot of the adults who were complaining that it's not for children, I thought that they overreacted. I think it's fine for most audiences if you're there with an adult. It really wasn't so edgy. And like Aaron said, a lot of that humor is going over the heads of kids anyway.
I think it tried to balance that. Maybe at times it does, I don't want to say hurt it because I think we all really like the movie, but it does balance that kind of camp, kind of children movie type of atmosphere, but then a lot of some of the jokes and some of the things they get into are a little bit more mature. But I kind of enjoyed that because it was intentionally campy and things like that. But like certain things with the themes, I think were maybe a little on the nose, where I think a more mature movie, mature audience would prefer that to be like maybe a little bit more subtlety when that's involved. But I think that comes with the balance of trying to make it mass appealing, where a younger woman in the audience or young girls that go see the movie can digest what the movie is trying to say, as well as be appeasable to people that are a little bit older and kind of have some ideas of their own going into it.
Yeah, actually, the first thing I texted Bo when I got out of the movie was, Barbie's a little too on the nose.
Yeah, and I think that is
in terms of the politics that it's getting at. But ultimately, it still is a Barbie movie in that, like, it is, like, it's Mattel, like,
right,
and also a car commercial.
Yeah, I was a little like surprised with like some of the Mattel like jokes they were able to, and the self-referential things they were able to get away with. But I think that's what I kind of appreciate about it too. It's like it wasn't just a standard generic movie based on IP that's just going to play it safe and make money and not think about actually making a substantial film. But they allowed Greta Gerwig to kind of do what she wanted to an extent, and I think that definitely benefited the movie.
It was hilarious, them trying to push the idea that Mattel's in it for the love of the game and not for profits.
You got to give him one.
Well, when Will Ferrell's
that's fair.
he's like, I did this because I love little girls and their dreams and the least weird, how in the
He was
and,
The least creepiest way.
yeah, in the least creepiest way possible.
He was actually like funnier than I've seen him in a while. I feel like he was a little bit of classic Will Ferrell, especially in that chase scene in the building when he's like jumping over to cubicles, saying, "No, this is faster." I feel like it's just classic stupid Will Ferrell, and that made me laugh so hard.
When he showed up in the end and he was basically calling himself all their mommies. And when he made the joke about like, sometimes we just want to get into a tickle fight, and the one guy tried to hug him. He's like, don't hug me. Which I told Marissa, I was like, it's just so funny to me that the two most memorable performances are dudes in a movie that is celebrating girl power and femininity. And I also think like the politics, I think maybe for a lot of people were mild, but then you get the other side of it where people are calling this like a radical indoctrination of little girls across the country.
Dude,
I think sometimes we lose track of how unpopular even something as mild as this can be in this country, where people hear some of the things they're saying and they lose their fucking minds.
two things. Like, number one, if I had a daughter and I showed her a movie whose message was like, yeah, you could be president, doctor, Supreme Court, like I would be like, yeah, like that's kind of like what I want like what I would want my daughter to like believe and strive for. And like number two, like it's like like what were you expecting from a Barbie movie? It's like going to like a restaurant and like your whole life you've hated fish and like you just don't like fish. You won't eat it, you won't touch it, and then you go to a restaurant and order it, and then you're upset that you don't like it. Like what are these like? And even so, like the end of the movie and the message is like, hey, like the real world has issues, Barbie world has issues, like would come out of it at the end, like kind of being, hey, realizing the problems of both and moving forward in like an equal and positive way. I don't know. It sounds pretty reasonable to me. If anything, it wasn't hardcore enough.
Right. Well, I also really appreciate the message because I'm always saying this on the podcast when we talk about diversity. It's about equal opportunities to be mediocre. And I think part of their message was, you know, a woman could be president or be a doctor or be a physicist. And it's like these jobs that are really difficult and reserved for the smartest and best of us. It's like, how come a woman just can't be a good person? You know, it's like the test that you always have for minorities, right? Jackie Robinson had never had the opportunity to go back at anybody. He had to be a model citizen. And oh yeah, he also had to be an awesome 5-star athlete. It's like you have to be perfect in order to be considered worthy. So that's the message that I think was the most profound.
Right.
But some of the parts, I mean, America Ferrera's speech about womanhood, I think if it was delivered by a lesser actor, would have came off as just totally out of left field. But instead, it felt really authentic, and I think that's just a testament to her acting in that moment. So the messages, you know, it could have been, I don't know, a bit smarter, more nuanced, but the way people are crying over it is so funny.
Part of the reason I also wanted more of America Ferrera's character is because of her whole I'm an ordinary woman and this is my experience, and like she pitches that idea at the end. But also like that's why I wanted more of her, so we can get that aspect of, you know, like she is an ordinary woman doing her job and this is what she enjoys, and how that could have translated into like how spectacular every version of Barbie is supposed to be, and how necessarily putting all your stock in like an inspirational thing such as Barbie wouldn't necessarily work, or maybe is not, as we clearly know, like is not the thing that you should pin all of your hopes and dreams on. It's just like a method, I guess. Or it's something that you should use as a launching pad for your own growth.
Yeah. I think with her too, it's like we kind of get the idea when we see the Mattel executives, like it's obviously the irony of a all-male executive team for an iconic toy that's targeted towards women. And like, I guess we're supposed to like make those connections that maybe her character has been overlooked and is qualified for more in her role in Mattel, but just hasn't been afforded that opportunity. But they never really dive into that whatsoever. So like, you know, I feel like if we did get maybe a little bit more of her character and her struggles and why she is feeling this way, I think that it could have made that point a little stronger.
Yeah, I also think that the real world, like Barbie Land is supposed to be flat, in my opinion, or at least that's how I viewed it. Like quite literally, it's made up of children's toy sets, and they float from the ceiling. Nothing is real. They can't even jump into the ocean because it's just a set. But I do think some of that flatness carries over into the real world, which I think can sometimes work as a detriment. I guess also maybe that's why they don't spend a ton of time in the real world. And I do think also the depiction of Mattel kind of straddling this like flatness of Barbie Land, but also the real world kind of just makes everything feel flat.
Yeah, Mattel did kind of seem like a Barbie Land set.
Yeah, and I liked that, but I was wondering, I was like, how am I supposed to like see this divide here if Mattel has created a Barbie Land and the FBI apparently knows about it. And I'm like, what am I supposed to take from this? Like,
well, I kind of like the idea when they establish when she sees weird Barbie, like when they're like, oh, is this like an alternate reality or some kind of other thing? She's like, yeah, whatever. Like, kind of just don't think, like, they kind of just told you in the movie, like, don't think about it too much. Let's just have fun here. And that's kind of what I just did when it came to that.
Yeah, I also
the logic
wish
does make no sense, but I didn't mind it whatsoever. Like when Ken takes over and all the Ken's toys start selling like crazy.
Yeah, that was funny.
But that is a good point though, Marissa, because it's like in The Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy's in the real world versus in Never Ever Land. This is just a clear distinction between playtime and real world. And
yeah,
here,
like,
the real world kind of feels weird.
When they're on the beach, the real world people are just kind of acting like evil Barbie Land people.
Yeah.
And I understand like the joke for it, right? But I feel like there was a little bit of a missed opportunity there in terms of, I don't know, I wanted to understand more why Barbie would go back to the real world. Because Weird Barbie does say in the beginning, like, yo, you've created this rift in reality. And she says it's like a two-way street, like, it couldn't have happened unless both she and Gloria were feeling this way. But I'm like, when did Barbie suddenly have thoughts of death? Like, it seemed very... I feel like I'm thinking way too hard about this. But I don't know, it seemed very one-sided. Like, Gloria's character was... dealing with this change in her life. Her daughter's a teenager who wants nothing to do with her. She's maybe unsatisfied with her career. So she's retreating to happier memories of Barbie that she got for her daughter and that she is now playing with herself. And I'm like, all right. So is it completely one-sided? Like, would Barbie have continued forever happy in Barbie Land? Or would she have eventually discovered some type of unsatisfaction? And what is it about the real world? Like, what anchors her to decide to come back? Or is it more just a complete and utter dissatisfaction with how Barbie Land functions? I don't know. Like the movie made me think about all these things. So again, I don't know how to come out of it after that, I guess.
No, that is a good point because it does sort of just end with her going to the real world and there's no definitive reason as to why. Where it's like, yeah, you can figure out the lesson that she's learned. That's easy enough, but maybe it's just not enough to justify that decision by the Barbie character in the end. And honestly, I think Margot Robbie's a movie star. She's good at every role. It got to a point where I was watching this and it just felt like Barbie wasn't this iconic toy that has dominated pop culture for the last few decades. It was just this character that Margot Robbie has brought to life. That's how good I thought she was in the role. But it does feel like she's overshadowed by Ken, where in the end, it really is just Ken's movie by the second half. And it's like the realization that he comes to is just a bit more profound, and I guess it's just better developed up until that point for him to realize.
Yeah, because I don't know about you guys. Like, I feel like his real, like you said, the like what his perception of what it is to be like masculine or a man, and realizing all the expectations on him. I thought that was more subtle and kind of more fully realized than the actual story that what Barbie's facing.
Yeah, it was almost. I don't want to say. It was a little. This is.
Say it.
Oh, I was gonna say it was almost a little bit like, yeah, reverse sexism does exist.
No, and that's something. Yeah,
which is obviously it's reductive. That's not like the full scope of everything that was happening. But because so much of the movie was very much on like one even keel in terms of feminism, what Barbie can do, what Ken can do, that because it was missing some nuance, like I feel like there is something a little weird about Ken's journey here and the way that it impacts Barbie and how Barbie, can impact Ken in this way. And I'm like, what am I supposed to think about Barbie Land now if all the Kens were kind of second class citizens? It's like, she's like, where do the Kens sleep? And she's like, I don't know. And I'm like, oh. But I also don't think it was anything that serious in the first place. Like, part of the joke is that Ken is not the toy that people play with.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Yeah, I think so. It's more so that he's just second fiddle. And that can relate to, I think, male loneliness is what they're going for there. And that's a subject that a lot of feminists will say is important and we should talk about it because it does relate to feminism. How the patriarchy, it turns men into these, I mean, we all know this, not in touch with their emotions, and how that can really damage an individual. And you're seeing that with Ken. But it is weird because the structure of the world and the universe, you can interpret it as many people are. And I don't think this was the intention as, emasculating all the Kens. And like you said, they don't give a shit about them. And then Barbie does sort of apologize for the way that she treated him there in the end. So they're touching on a lot of ideas that don't come together as cleanly as maybe they should have.
Yeah, I was just towards the end of the movie, I was like, there's so much like happening at once here. Though I did think it was funny when they're like, hey, can we get a guy on the Supreme Court? And she's like, no.
We'll get there. Not now.
One of the lower courts, she said, I thought Issa Rae was so funny as the president. That was perfect casting.
And
she's just like, she's got that vibe to her that she's smarter than everybody else. In the beginning too,
when they're all accepting their awards and they're like, you're so great. And they're like, I know.
That was great.
But there were a couple of moments that were like, a lot of people were saying that with Oppenheimer and Barbie, like, you kind of expected the existentialism of Oppenheimer, but with Barbie too, I think the scene with her and Rhea Perlman in that, like, whatever world that was, but
purgatory.
Yeah, like, that was a very emotional and I think hard-hitting scene. And I think, like you said, everyone's talking about Gosling as Ken, but I think when Margot Robbie as Barbie, seeing her journey throughout and really hitting those emotional scenes, even a smaller scene with her with the older woman on the bench, like, I thought brought great life to that character. And yeah, we've known for a while she's one of the better actors working, but sometimes when people have that superstar or that A-list shine, you kind of forget sometimes, like, yeah, they're actually like very good, and there's a reason why they're at the point in their career as they are. So
no, dude, she's the modern day Marlon Brando in that she's really, really hot, but also just super talented. And it's like, it's just so rare, She's like Giannis Antetokounmpo athleticism, Steph Curry jump shooting.
Speaking of Marlon Brando, the Godfather joke.
That's so funny.
So funny.
Even the Snyder Cut one made me laugh because, like, we lived through it, like, just recently. Like,
it was funny, but I was like, damn, that's such an internet joke.
Yeah, it was like part of the humor. Part of me was just like, I am so online.
No.
Like the 1995 BBC Pride and Prejudice. I was like, Jesus Christ.
That whole bit was hysterical. That may have been the funniest bit of the entire movie. It's like she spent 7 hours stalking her ex-best friend's bachelorette party on Instagram. So
it's like,
good,
yeah,
dude.
she rots in bed and watches Pride and Prejudice for the 10 millionth time. And of course, my favorite online rebuttal to that is people are like, we're watching the 2005 Pride and Prejudice movie, actually.
Is that with Tom Walsgams?
Yep.
Hell yeah.
It's got the hand clench.
When I was laughing when he's like serenading her on the guitar on the beach, and then it pans out and it's all the Kens doing the same thing.
So funny.
For a second, I thought he was going to play Wonderwall.
That would have been perfect, actually. When it cut to 4 hours later, hysterical. All the music, dude. Ken's song was obviously great, but I thought the best song was the opening by Lizzo, the Pink song.
Yeah, and
that
how
was
like
how
interactive it was with like the settings.
There's just something so like appealing to me about.
Oh, Dua Lipa was just there, and John Cena.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, could have used way more Dua Lipa. I need the Dua Lipa spinoff without a doubt. I love when they get pop stars to act in movies who clearly can't act. Their deliveries are always so funny. That's like Rihanna in the movie where they're at war. She gets like the one line where she goes boom. The celebration of, and it's so funny because everybody, ripping their fucking hair out. Ben Shapiro burning Barbie dolls on his YouTube channel, fucking loser. But the celebration of feminine energy to me is just so appealing. It just seems so fun sometimes to be a girl. Like, yeah, girls' night is every night, Ken. Get the fuck out of here, They just
The row
just
in
have
front of me
more fun.
was just it was the whole row was taken by like one group of friends, all just dressed up for Barbie. I was like, we're kind of left out.
Right, like you don't get that with guys.
Oh no!
It has to be like a sporting
Tell
event.
that, yeah, do it at any jet game or any sporting event for that matter.
You're
All the
rough
guys
one.
dressed the same, just drinking beers and ready to go. But they were these three guys at my Oppenheimer screening dressed as Oppenheimer, and I thought that was fucking hilarious.
See, this is one of
Actually-
the things I love. Sorry to cut you off, Marissa. I love about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure because it's like heterosexual males obsessed with fashion. Men don't get that. But with the Barbie movie, it's all the girls dressing up, and even the celebration of fashion in the movie. And that's part of Barbie's legacy is how iconic the looks have become. So that's something that I just really enjoyed about not only the movie, but the theater experience, being in a theater with so many people who are just so excited to be enjoying it.
I was going to say that in my showing of Barbie, there were just groups of guys who I can clearly tell either had just seen Oppenheimer or were going to see Oppenheimer after this.
It's like the little kid going to the.
They seem to be having a great time.
I love that.
They're like the little kids who have to go to the store with their mom, but she'll get you McDonald's out on the way home.
Well, also like the idea of, so Margot Robbie has that Barbie look, perfect casting. And I know at a time Anne Hathaway was being considered. She's another one. You put a blonde wig on her, she would have been perfect. But I found it interesting how stereotypical Barbie kind of gets lost in the shuffle because, we have all these other Barbies who are doing incredible things. And she's like, when she's having that breakdown saying like, oh, I can't fly a plane, I don't know how to do physics. Like, where does stereotypical Barbie fit in the world anymore, right? Because that's not enough. It's about being exceptional.
So yeah,
So I found that to be interesting.
when she's like driving around and we meet all the Barbies, I'm like, oh, like she's not shit, huh? Like she's supposed to be the main Barbie. I thought she was gonna be like the most popular, coolest one. But then you see like President Barbie and all these other Barbies. I'm like, what do you do?
Right.
What's your deal?
Yeah, so the way they tied that in, because normally it's that's the look that everybody wants, right? Who wouldn't want to be you? It's like, well, what's under that? That's normally not celebrated. And with her character in particular, she realizes, oh, I have nothing else to offer. Maybe they should have focused more on that, because I think that's a really interesting idea, as it relates to the real world and also how it relates to the legacy of Barbie. So I think I would have preferred more of that, more diving into the psyche of her character. Because those moments when she breaks down were actually really funny. Like when she tells America Ferrera and her daughter to go away and she just like flops to the floor like a plastic doll.
Yeah, I also think, there's only so much that they could interrogate, like the legacy of Barbie, considering that Mattel signed off on this movie.
Yeah, no, it definitely feels like they took it as far as it could go. Like they were looking into the abyss of, if we cross this line, this movie will be canceled by Mattel, because there's no way that, I'm not going to pat the corporation on the back, but they do get some credit for the freedom that they allowed.
Well, now they're
Greta
making
Gerwig
tons of money.
I know, dude. This movie has a real shot at $1 billion, which is awesome.
Not even that, the merchandising. When he
Yeah.
I can't even know how to pronounce it. Knuff sweatshirts that go sold already.
Yeah, I am Knuff.
I am Knuff.
Well, that song was also great.
It unlocked his Disney kid.
That whole scene.
Well, dude.
When they said that the Willy Wonka guy said that he casted Timothy Chalamet because he saw that old video of him in high school? Well, this is the version of that working out, because Gosling was just like, yeah, that's the Disney kid coming out. Just perfect. The whole sequence was awesome. It was like, when they go like that song, even though they released the snippet beforehand, I kind of thought they probably should have held on to that. But like at the time in the story when it actually happens and leading into like that battle was just so funny. And I hope it gets nominated for the Oscar so he has to perform it live.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's going to happen. Even if he doesn't get nominated, they're going to at least ask him. And I hope he does say yes. But I was telling somebody the other day that the hype for this movie is going to last, I think, until award season, because I think it's going to be a contender. I think actually it will be nominated for Best Picture. Gosling is going to be nominated for Best Supporting Actor. And I think Margot Robbie's got a shot. We'll have to wait and see if it's deserving. There may be 5 other performances that come out that are just as good, if not better. But I think with Gosling, he was such a powerhouse in this. You can argue that it's the best performance of his career. I mean, he reached Richard Pryor levels of funny for me, where it truly was like everything he said or did was just hilarious. That whole sequence at the end when he's crying and Barbie's apologizing to him, it almost sucks all the emotion out of it because he's just so
when he tries
funny.
to kiss her too, she's like, no, that's not what I mean.
Yeah.
That's not what I mean.
Yeah, he was great. I'm trying to think of Michael Cera as Alan. That was a funny character.
He was so funny, and he's like, "You guys gotta get me out of here."
And that was a bit that I loved, man. When the car would turn over after somebody got surprised.
So what do they say? It's like, oh yeah, we're just rubbing all the Ken's feet. Alan's helping. He loves it. It's like, no, I don't. That's not true.
And it would just like cut to him just like by himself, or at to the side of the crowd, and it's like his expression, and it was just so funny every time.
And the Ken War was also just so well done, dude. When it became just a dance competition between Ryan Gosling and Simu, that may have been my favorite sequence of the movie. We need to bring that to real life. Instead of men fighting, just dance-offs.
It's West Side Story.
Seriously. Because fighting, you can get an easy lick in, maybe knock somebody out, but dancing, you can't cheat. You can't cheat the game when it comes to dancing. He was the best guy around. What about the murders? What murders? But for the most part, this was, I think it was a blast. It's definitely a success.
Yeah, I would 100% see it again.
Yeah, definitely. I want to see them both again.
It's a great movie to watch too, like with a bunch of friends, like for a nice movie night. I'm gonna buy it instantly on Blu-ray when it comes out, and just watch it by myself. The shit with also with Midge, that was her name, right?
Barbie?
Yeah.
Her Barbie's.
Yeah. When Will Ferrell is, it's like a jump scare when he sees her. He's like, "Oh, Midge,
I thought we discontinued you."
They just didn't even want to fucking acknowledge poor Midge. I'll tell you what though, Michael Keaton's Ken is still the best Ken. Which is no slight against Ryan Gosling. It's just how funny Michael Keaton was in Toy Story 3. All right, guys, before we move on to our review of Oppenheimer during the second half of this podcast, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor for today's episode, and that would be Factor. Being an adult is coming to the realization that you are solely responsible for feeding yourself 3 times a day, but also realizing that you never have time to cook because you're always working or watching movies. Well, that's really just me. That's where Factor comes in. Factor is America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit that helps you fuel up fast with flavorful and nutritious ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with reaching your goals of watching over 500 movies in a year. Well, that's also just my goal, but hey, we all need to live for something. With Factor, you can stick to your wellness goals if your plan is to eat healthier this summer with premium ready-to-eat meals featuring high-quality ingredients, such as broccolini, leeks, and asparagus. Treat yourself to 34-plus weekly restaurant-quality options like bruschetta shrimp risotto, green goddess chicken, and grilled steakhouse filet mignon, ready in just 2 minutes. Factor offers delicious, flavor-packed options on the menu each week to fit a variety of lifestyles, from keto to calorie smart, vegan and veggie, and protein plus. Prepped by chefs and approved by dietitians, each meal has all of the ingredients you need to feel satisfied all day long while meeting your goals. And if you're looking to mix it up, you can add a protein to select vegan plus veggie meals each week. Round out your meal and replenish your snack supply with an assortment of 45 plus add-ons, including breakfast items like their delicious apple cinnamon pancakes, bacon and cheddar egg bites, and potato, bacon, and egg breakfast skillet. Or for an easy wellness boost, try refreshing beverage options like cold-pressed juices, shakes, and smoothies. So if you're interested in getting your ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door, head on over to factormeals.com/nerdsoup50 and use code nerdsoup50 to get 50% off. That's code NERDSOUP50 at factormeals.com/NERDSOUP50 to get 50% off. So don't wait. Take advantage of this deal and start eating those prepped meals so that you can save time and watch movies and shows or play video games, right? Who has time to cook and prepare that stuff? Oh, God. Well, I guess now we can move on to Oppie.
Good old Hoppy.
I don't know if we can be trusted with such a weapon. But we have no choice.
So this was Christopher Nolan's, I'm not sure how many films he's made so far. This has got to be like 10 or 11 maybe? 12. So Christopher Nolan's 12th film, an epic biography about J. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb. It is truly epic in scope and runtime, 3-hour film that somehow doesn't feel 3 hours whatsoever. And when you watch the way that it plays out, it feels like Tenet was the warm-up for how this story was structured, in the way that the middle is the end, but also the beginning. And that's what was so impressive to me about this movie, is that it's just throwing so much at the audience, and none of it's overwhelming. It all comes together so cleanly in the end. And it was a genius move to make the Lewis Strauss character basically the co-protagonist and also the antagonist for Oppie's story. Just sharing the story between those two characters where they're complete opposites, except for the ambition that they both have to do something that's going to be remembered in the history books. So it really is just two trials taking place. And obviously, you know, all the background stuff with Oppenheimer's character. And then it all comes together so cleanly in the end. To me, it is his best movie since The Dark Knight. I came into it so confident, just based on my own readings of the book that it's based on, and the trailers and the technical stuff, 70 millimeter shooting the entire thing in IMAX. You know, it's like a mythology that preceded the film's actual release. So I loved it. It's definitely going to be the best or top 2 of the year for me.
Yeah, I think I'll take it one step further. I think it is his best movie. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I just think, for all the reasons you said, but just as a theater experience alone, it was probably one of my favorite experiences, sitting down and watching a movie. And like you said, it doesn't feel 3 hours at all, and I think that's due to probably some of the best editing and scores to accompany this film. I think it complemented it so well. It always just felt like the stakes were at its highest, and even just regular scenes of dialogue, it made you hang on every word. And then the way it was edited with the different time periods, obviously out of order and when it actually happens, but placed so perfectly into what the story is building towards and where it currently is. And it really just felt like it moved along so smoothly, so paced perfectly, that even that you can say there are multiple climaxes. Is obviously the big moment is the Trinity test, but there are things that the film leads up to that I think, me watching it, were just as important or as grand due to all these things. And everyone, we talk about Nolan just being one of the few filmmakers today that is given the opportunity to make these kind of bigger budget movies, but tell interesting stories and really make it separate itself from the sort of generic blockbusters that we get today. And to be able to tell this story in this format and be awarded the budget that he was allowed from Universal was just something that we're probably going to see less and less of, but hopefully this kind of gives studios maybe a little bit more confidence to allow filmmakers to tell these stories in these ways. But yeah, I can't speak enough of just how enthralled I was just sitting there watching this movie. I could have sat there for probably another half hour, because I just felt like no matter what I was being shown, no matter what time we were in, I was just that invested. And I don't think I've ever seen, there are probably instances, but just your standard dialogue scene, I really haven't. It's just very rare to kind of craft a scene in a way that just feels like the weight of the world everything's just so pressing in that moment, and it really did keep you engaged. Oh, that's a big one.
The Trinity test.
It just kept you invested in a way that I think few writers and filmmakers can do, and especially with like, I'm a sucker for like courthouse dramas. Those two kind of the hearings and the kangaroo court, I thought were, like, to me, more interesting. Well, not more interesting, but on par with what was all going on in like the St. Alamos and the kind of the story going on there to the lead up to the Trinity test. Like, I just found it all very enthralling. Like, I feel like sometimes with movies like that or stories that jump around, there might be times where you're like, all right, I kind of want to get back to this part because I'm more interested in that. I didn't feel that one bit because I felt like it just all complemented each other so well. And like I said before, the way it was edited, it all just tied together and felt like a very linear story, even though you're jumping all over the place.
I love this movie. I have not seen every single Christopher Nolan movie.
You didn't watch The Dark Knight, right?
Enough of them. The one I saw most recently was Interstellar, which was great. But this movie, I think, immediately like impresses upon you like a sense of gravity and tension, which is fitting, you know, for a movie about the atomic bomb and the people who created the atomic bomb and the consequences of the atomic bomb. And the two timelines where one is in color, one's in black and white. And of course, there's a million things you could say about why one is color, one is black and white. I like to think it's because Strauss's point of view is subjective, which is why it's black and white, or it's like you're with him or against him, which is why it looks that way, at least. And that Oppenheimer's point of view might be a little bit more, I guess, objective, or we're kind of, you know, in a third person lens watching him there. The whole movie, I was wondering at what point that the Trinity test would happen. Like, when are they going to detonate the bomb? Because clearly it's going to mark a new, it's like there's a before and after the bomb, especially before and after the Trinity test.
Right.
And so I remember looking at my watch, and I was like, oh, we're only 2 hours in. And I knew it was a 3-hour runtime. And so I was fascinated to see how the rest of the movie would progress. And like Aaron was saying, the tension of just Oppenheimer in this kangaroo court, his reputation being completely shredded because of, you know, his opposition to creating the H-bomb, the complicated grappling of would he have created the H-bomb if it was in an arms race scenario, like, you know, how they created the A-bomb? Does he feel guilt? Like, what are his feelings? Is he being a martyr? Is he too obsessed with how he feels rather than all the people that were killed as a result of his work? There's like so many different things that the movie is grappling with. And I don't know if we ever, and I'm glad that we don't get like a true, like, this is what Oppenheimer believes. He even when he's directly asked, I think in the movie, he can't even truly come up with an answer that is satisfying, I think, to himself or anyone else. Because how do you, like, it's such a crazy thing. And for us, obviously, like, we're so many years, like, we live in a world where nuclear weapons exist. I can't imagine what it must have been like to have to make that decision. And like, the Truman scene was funny, but it is also very poignant when he says, like, I'm the one who dropped the bombs. I made it, so you're just the father of the bomb. You're, as far as anyone else is concerned, I'm the one who killed those people. Stop being such a crybaby about it. And it's just, it was fascinating how they tackled all of these things.
Him waving the napkin in front of his face
it was like
hilarious.
When when you see just the way either military high-ups or people removed from the situation just fail to actually grasp like what was going down in this man's mind and everything he had to grapple with. I mean, obviously the Truman scene, and also the scene when he chooses not to bomb a certain city because him and his wife honeymoon there. Just like the disconnects between what he's going through and maybe how people outside of his community look at it. And yeah, him having to grapple with all that, it just was something that was incredible. And the way Nolan was able to convey all of that, I thought, and Cillian Murphy with his acting, more so just his facial acting, I think thought was brilliant. Obviously, the ending shot and the moments of him just kind of in his own mind, I thought were some of the better shots of the movie, and some of the two best scenes I don't think had anything to do with the Trinity test. I think it's when he's giving that speech and Also, when he is being, holy shit, that scared the shit out of me.
Fuck you, Thunder.
Damn, that's how Oppenheimer must have felt. And also that scene when he's getting examined by Jason Clarke's character, and then he has that moment where everything kind of flashes. I thought those were like my two favorite scenes of the movie because it just encapsulated everything that this man was going through, and like Marissa was touching upon, like that kind of ambiguity in the sense of like where is he really at? What are his opinions on what really transpired? Obviously, there is some guilt involved, but you do get the sense that if he had to do it all over again, he would.
Yeah, there's like a special kind of callousness that we see from like many different people. Like, you cited the one, they didn't want to bomb Kyoto because of its cultural significance, but also specifically like that one guy like to vacation there with his wife. And even the callousness to war, I think especially it's like you can tell it's like their immediate goal is, to stop the Soviets. It's to end the war in the Pacific theater. The long-term consequences don't matter so much. The short-term ones are solved. Like when they realize that there's a chance that they could detonate the atmosphere and they push ahead anyway because the chances are near zero. It's wartime, so it's better that they have this bomb first and possibly destroy the planet first before, the Germans could do it or the Soviets could do it or anyone else. And it's just, how complicated all of these things are. And it's like, who could you possibly sympathize with? I don't know. Yeah, the movie was so good.
The line in the gymnasium when he's giving his victory speech and he's starting to process what he's actually done and what are going to be the consequences. When he goes, if only we built it in time to use it on the Germans. He totally lost sight of why they started this, because it was about the idea that the Nazis were going to build this bomb before them, and the Nazis want to take over the world. If they have this bomb, it's going to be an utter disaster. But eventually the Nazis surrendered, and he just becomes obsessed with the finish line. He's just totally blinded by his ambition. And that's, where the ambiguity really sets in that gymnasium scene when everything's, he can't hear the screams. He only hears one scream. And it's a woman wailing because she's probably having her skin burnt off. And then she actually sees that happening to a woman in front of him. And that's why
Cillian Murphy stepped on the charred corpse.
Yeah, it becomes like a hallucinatory moment for him because you don't know if these things are actually happening. Like the dude throwing up. Like, was that real? Why would that guy be throwing up?
Rules.
And you're thinking in your head, oh, maybe he's experiencing the same thing. He's sick about what he's done. Or maybe
it's like fraud, right? It's like, how do you? It's like you want to celebrate for them. It's like you celebrate the bomb works, but the bomb working means that hundreds of thousands of people were killed and many more will die. And of course, Oppenheimer, I think his real life quotes, it's creating the bomb. His goal with it was to end war entirely. That like that the idea of a deterrent will be more powerful than anything else. Which. Is not quite true.
Right.
It's like another bomb. Yeah. Clearly the reality did not work out the way that he likely would have wanted it to. And so it's like, what is truly, like, I even think they say this in the movie, like, does the end justify the means? Like, at what point is the cost too much? And it's like, well, now they've gone ahead and done it. And so now how do you handle the fallout of that? But also the imagery just again and again where like, the drops falling, we see missiles in the sky, and it's again and again this idea of a full-on nuclear war just destroying the earth. It was so beautiful. Like that, like just seeing, I wish I could have seen it in like a true IMAX, like just the film itself.
Yeah, the special effects were unbelievable. And it brought to mind, because I read the review, Josh Lewis's review on Letterboxd, probably the best review I've read of the movie so far, but he was talking about how the Trinity test reminded him of Twin Peaks Season 3, but also Terrence Malick's Tree of Life, the sequence where the universe is being created, and he used actual paint to create those sequences. And I don't know if they've given us the full insight into how they did it, but I know there were obviously a lot of tricks, a lot of practical wizardry that they were employing to create those sequences. And when you have to use that old school ingenuity, it really shows because it just looks so incredible. It's terrifying, but it's also beautiful. And they struck that balance perfectly. And the whole way that Trinity test was, I mean, there's so many incredible scenes in this movie. And that's another thing I wanted to compliment him on. He is throwing so much. I can't believe how much he crammed in about this guy's life. Like even the lines about like Cubism, Picasso, and Stravinsky. It's such a fascinating time. It's like humanity collectively broke through the fourth wall. But the setup to that Trinity test, dude, when you know that jump scare of the sound is coming.
Yeah, and they
Unbelievable.
hold it for so long.
So long.
It's
It
like
feels
just
like
when
forever.
you start, yeah, just when you like relax a little bit, then it hits you.
And I kept saying like, don't get scared, don't get scared. It's gonna happen. And of course, I jumped as soon as the sound came in. But the tension of
Josh
that, the
Peck
countdown.
right there.
No,
I'm
it's so
pressing
hard.
it.
Well, especially with like we know what happens and how everything worked out. Like obviously the atmosphere didn't ignite unless we're actually living in a simulation. Different podcast. But like to create that tension of something that you know is going to go a certain way is pretty remarkable. And I mean, yeah, just
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
aspect of this movie, I think, is just really magnificent. I mean, even like you said, just cramming so much into it. But I don't even want to say cram because that means it sounds like it's bloated, which it wasn't. But like so many different elements, like removed from just the actual building of the bomb, the politics going around, I thought were pretty fascinating, especially during that time with when communism basically being the scarlet letter when it comes to your reputation and just but that time, that influx of ideas, the idea that the looming war with or conflict with the Soviet Union was just hanging over everything, you know, working with your allies, but keeping all these things from them just because you are afraid for it to get out. And the aspects of just, you know, when we see Heisenberg and we know him working with the Nazis, the race against time, but like the fact that Hitler wouldn't give him resources because of them being Jewish. Just like all these things that play here, really building the picture of where we are and the setting. It was fascinating. And just, you know, obviously I know bits and pieces of the story, but really getting more of that insight, I thought keeping it as tight as it was and not being overly exploratory when it comes to those things, but having it complements Oppenheimer's main story and everything he's going through. It just created a very clear and vivid picture, and it was something that I really appreciated.
But that was a great moment when they realized that the Nazis took the wrong turn, that they're doing all these dumbass experiments that aren't going to work. They're like, damn, we overrated the shit out of them.
Yeah.
Heisenberg, he blew the 3-1 lead. But I think that, you know, to your point about the ambiguity of the character, when he does begin to put it together, how naive he was, he's become the poster child for the naive scientist that thinks that they can control the military and not vice versa. And that's been tackled throughout fiction since this time period. This idea that the military always bastardizes the scientific achievements of brilliant men. It's always the two-dimensional thinkers taking advantage of the people who can see a three-dimensional world. It's, you know, Full Metal Alchemist tackles that. The Wrath of Khan did it really well.
I was going to say your point about
and
like
that's why,
you know, the Germans being naive when it came to like quantum physics and obviously what Hitler was about, but like how that reflected the United States government and how they would basically, not to the same extent, but, you know, if you're a known communist, like the hesitancy to have Oppenheimer on this project and have all this security around and making sure that nothing's getting out. It's, you know, a little bit similar in that sense where, especially afterwards in the whole kangaroo court and all of that, just, you know, persecuting him and basically taking shots at his legitimacy as someone who can be trusted just because of his past affiliations.
Yeah, and I think they stress it a little bit, but in the book there's an emphasis on the missed opportunity to create an international community that regulates nuclear energy. That if we would have looped the Soviets into the Manhattan Project earlier, it would have put them at ease, thinking, okay, the United States trusts us with this information. We're not going to rush to build our own bomb. We're not going to be caught in this nuclear arms race that's going to dominate politics for the next 50, 60 years. That the international cooperation that could have been started by the Manhattan Project would have been so beneficial to the rest of the world. But of course, as soon as the war ended, everybody has to retreat into their corners and have this belief that it was American exceptionalism and superiority that created this bomb, even though the movie demonstrates how it was an international coalition of scientists from all over the world that were granted the security clearances, because even my boy Albert Einstein, who met the qualifications, wasn't allowed in. But that's why, the scene with Truman, it pisses you off so much, because it's that cocky American attitude that everybody who's born in this country is so used to. This idea that you can somehow monopolize science, where the scientific community is trying to tell him they will get there eventually. They're going to figure this out because they have resources. They're not stupid. No matter what you want to say about them with your propaganda, eventually the Soviets are going to meet us at this same place. And that's why Louis Strauss's character, a lot of people have been complimenting Robert Downey Jr.'s performance. He was terrific. He is like the literal manifestation of the American military-industrial complex. And I thought what Robert Downey did so well is he brought a real vulnerability and insecurity to that character as to why he's doing this. That's what I said, that even though they're opposites, him and Oppenheimer, the one thing that they have in common is ambition. So when he sees this opportunity to champion the hydrogen bomb, he takes it, telling Oppenheimer the president needs to know about this. If the Soviets are going to get there, we're going to need our own hydrogen bombs. And it was totally the wrong thing to do. But he ends up becoming, similar to Oppenheimer, a tragic character of his own story. Obviously, history's not going to be as sympathetic towards him as they are with Oppenheimer, because he's just an asshole, right? He's just, everyone's calling him the hater of the century. It's essentially trying to ride the coattails of Oppenheimer and then usurp that influence.
It was like the fact that slight, that he believes that Oppenheimer is the one who turned Einstein against him, when it turns out they weren't even talking about him in the first place. And it's just something that he carries with him. Like literally like carries him. It's like the singular grudge that pushes him through all of the other slights. It's the thing that he comes back to. Like, Oppenheimer turned Einstein against him. He turned the scientific community against him.
It's so funny how...
And then Han Solo's like, what if they weren't talking about you?
I was so confused by you saying Han Solo. I thought you meant Hans Beta.
It reminded me of Aaron Burr and Hamilton. Just generational hater.
Oh, yeah, no, that really is his role. Just being a dickhead.
He was so good, though. And, like, talking about Alden Ehrenreich, he was fantastic, too. They did a good job of, like, having... And that's, like, what you get, the benefit of being Christopher Nolan, is to get, like, Oscar winners to have bit parts like Rami Malek, but just completely deliver in a role that, you know, most movies or most directors couldn't get someone of that caliber to agree to just come in and do a small part, but it makes it that much more effective when you have someone of his caliber delivering that final kind of nail in the coffin for that Strauss character who you grow to hate throughout the movie. And talk about a jump scare, Casey Affleck.
Horrifying in that role. Seriously, he was one of the most terrifying presences in that film.
But even like,
just you see the seething nature of that character. It was so intimidating.
Dude, he was so good, but like just the nature of it being Casey Affleck too. Like,
I think there was a little like tongue in cheek, like Nolan winking at people,
because that wasn't like, no one knew he was in it too. It's like, holy shit, it's fucking Casey Affleck.
Yeah, I remember seeing him in the cast list and thinking, I'm surprised more people haven't brought more attention to this. But yeah, no, he did, from a writing standpoint, that's why it's the most impressive script that he's ever written. And Jonathan Nolan didn't co-write this with him. So for him to take the book, we've talked about all the shit that they're throwing at us when it comes to the political and scientific commentary. But the fact that he gave all these bit parts to these incredible actors and they all had moments where they really shine. Like with Jason Clarke, he was a great presence throughout. And then when he gets his shit thrown back at him by Emily Blunt, people are saying that scene alone might get her an Oscar nomination because of how sassy she was.
That scene was so good.
Dude, even
it was so good.
Go ahead.
Obviously, that was a great moment, but like an underrated aspect of her performance, I think, was like even during the earlier scenes before we actually really meet the character, her sitting behind Oppenheimer and just having her reactions on her face and everything, I thought it was brilliant. It's not like something that's super evident, but like it was very like it told you about these two people before you even really get to know them.
Yeah, it shows the commitment that they have to each other, and that even when they hurt each other, they still stand by one another. But her performance was great.
Well, I mean, he does say at one point, he's like, me and Kitty are adults. And he's like, we have been through like everything together, or like we've been through things worse than this.
Yeah, and she's not even upset about the cheating. She's just upset that it now goes on record. Their relationship was very mature.
Yeah.
I mean, even the way that they got together, that they sat down with her husband and sort of negotiated a divorce because it was a loveless marriage. And also, you know, they don't focus on it a lot, but the lack of attention that they showed their children. That's something when you read the book and you see how
Yeah.
fucked up those kids turned out to be. It's really sad. And just having that in the back of my mind that, you know, like I said, it's not so much attention paid to that.
Oppenheimer Jr. getting frustrated building a Lego set. Will never be him.
But even moments like, you know, moments with their friends, like I forget the actor who plays Chevalier, but he was really good in that scene that comes back to bite Oppenheimer during the hearings. Or Josh Hartnett as Lawrence. He was terrific.
Yeah.
Being Oppenheimer's you know, scientific friend, but politically they kept butting heads over Oppenheimer wanting to help the students unionize, and you know, him wanting to keep the politics out of the laboratory, and Oppenheimer saying that they're one and the same. Look what's happening in the world. It's a revolution all around us that you can't escape. So their relationship was fantastic. You know, to even get back to Cillian Murphy, I made the point on my Letterboxd review that, you know, you're seeing many faces of his life where he's the young, naive scientist who's restless, but he can hear the world around him. He can see the particles, and it's like everything's singing to him. And then he becomes the administrator where he has to be an adult and more like a politician, as Teller calls him. And then by the end, he's just this broken man where if you feel like if you pushed him over, he would just shatter into glass. He was just up for the challenge of every face of Oppenheimer's, of every phase of Oppenheimer's life. It's some of the best acting I've ever seen from a leading performer. And that gymnasium scene is, talk about a scene that's going to ring eternal throughout film's history.
Well, we always talk about Cillian Murphy in the past, just like his face, like having just one of the best interesting faces, but like in those moments,
yeah, a lot of face stuff.
Oh yeah, cut glass with that thing. But like, what a perfect casting, because like he does have this uniqueness about the way he looks, but like he wears basically every decision he makes in those moments when they zoom in on him, and it just makes for such a compelling landscape of just so many different things, like basically touching upon like all we talked about with his character, like the regret, and like in those moments when he's just looking, like there's just so much, like the whole story is just painted there. It is pretty incredible, and obviously a testament to his acting, not just because he has just such a unique look to him, but like it all just blends so well, and it really is just like the perfect role for him, and the wherewithal of Christopher Nolan to be like, no, yeah, Cillian Murphy is going to be my Oppenheimer. Worked for him for years, obviously knows his capabilities, but you know, it's a huge step for him in his career. Obviously, he's been around for a while, led television shows, but like this is going to be forever. Like this is going to be his movie. He's going to be Oppenheimer, and it's just one of the better castings. Like I really, leaving this movie, I was thinking about like who else could be this role. Yeah, Christian Bale could be Oppenheimer, right? You know, relationship with Nolan, but like I don't know if anyone could deliver that performance the way he did.
Yeah, it feels like the role that he was made to play. The only thing, this is not a real criticism, the only thing that bothered me is that he was so much shorter than everybody else, and apparently Oppenheimer was a tall guy.
And he had hops.
So I was like, damn, y'all, can we give him like some heels? Yeah, and he had ops. Just a little 2-inch heel, you know, bring him up to 5'11", maybe. That could have.
Matt Damon too. One of the best performances he's given.
Yes, yeah, and the Groves character is fascinating.
And Dane DeHaan, one punchable face before. Now I really want to see him.
Oh yeah, they were all cast so perfectly. Like yeah, just Dane DeHaan. He's got the perfect military face of a guy who's so smug, and like the battles over Oppenheimer's security clearance, he's just such a little worm in those scenes. When it comes to the military men, Casey Affleck, that scene was. There were so many scenes that were just scary.
That's a lot of where the tension came from, because like for a movie where everyone knows what happens with the bomb, to focus it or to ground it so much in these things, like I of course didn't know about, you know, the battle with his security clearance in the first place, getting it, and also the hearing where it got revoked eventually, and like what they dragged him through in order to do that. And I feel like a lot, maybe I don't know, the average person wouldn't. So to ground the movie so much and all of that really does create, you know, like the tension, like the gravity that I was saying earlier. Like in order to keep the audience engaged, it's like you might know how things turned out with the nuclear bomb, but in that exact scene, that exact moment, you don't know how these people are going to react to either of the things that are being like put forth. Like, you know, when Oppenheimer is just totally putting his foot in his mouth when it's concerned to trying to give, like, you know, the tip off about Chevalier without actually incriminating him or giving his name.
It was so awkward to watch for Oppenheimer.
And how, yeah, and how much it comes back to bite him, or, you know, him and Jean Tatlock, Florence Pugh, like how their relationship kind of is so like fraught, and how ultimately he, you know, like she dies and it's kind of left up in the air of whether she committed suicide or if maybe he's believing that she was killed because of her
Him
association.
spitting out his catchphrase right before sex. Classic.
I was like, this is where they're gonna drop
Yeah,
it.
he had like his little catchphrases. He had that one, and like, what else would you want from Theory alone?
Or when he suited up after his boy Robbie told him to take off the military uniform. It was like a superhero suit up moment where he puts on the top hat and the pipes there on the counter.
Or, you know, every time Einstein showed up and it was like a
Dude,
Marvel
when
flavor
he
reveal.
shows up as outside of his house.
Yeah, it's like the car leaves
Really
and
was.
And
Einstein is just
Einstein
there.
knew what the guy was saying. He wasn't even in earshot. It's like, he's right, dude. No. Like, you didn't hear that.
Really was.
Bert.
Fucking physicist Avengers. I saw a funny tweet. It was like nudging my girlfriend during Oppenheimer and saying that's Einstein.
Gotta let the girlfriends know, man, who's on screen, who's not. But I thought that final scene with Einstein's monologue about the time when they awarded him something at Berkeley, and he's saying that was more for you guys than it was for me, and that's eventually going to happen to you. And it fast forwards to when he was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom to try and rehabilitate his image.
Was it the Medal of Freedom or is it the Fermi?
Oh yeah, the Fermi Award. Those scenes where, you know, it could have been such a gimmick to include Einstein because, yeah, they did work together at Princeton. He wasn't a part of the Manhattan Project. Even the sequence, the scene where he gives him the notes and he's like, can you double check this? And Einstein's like, I'm not good at math. Have somebody else do it. But those scenes were really powerful where Einstein was like the science Yoda of this time. And even in real life, because he was removed from the politics. He didn't have any time for that. Like he said, he turned his back on his country and never looked back. He was like, you should do the same thing. And that's the contradictions of Oppenheimer. And I think that's, you know, part of the downfall of the American exceptionalism and these ideas that we tell ourselves, that we become so patriotic that we can get lost in the machine and become cogs. You know, like American imperialism, it's not a grand conspiracy. It's just a symptom of how our society is structured. And you get lost, like with Strauss and like with Oppenheimer. And when it's all said and done, you're left with so much uncertainty and moral contradiction. Where it's not even a question of right or wrong. It's a question of, like, can I even live with myself anymore? Because it's all just so goddamn messy. And with Einstein, he never had to deal with that because, like I said, he was removed from it. He never put himself in those situations.
Well, I mean, he wrote the letter that convinced the United States to start the nuclear program in the first place.
And even then, that's where it began, you can say, as a noble thing to do. Like, even World War II, it always gets that rap of the one war that was fought for good reasons. And obviously both sides did horrible things. But in the beginning, it was like, yeah, somebody needs to stop the fucking Nazis because they're never going to stop. And then you see what happens. Eventually the Soviets did stop them, even though we like to take all the credit. And it becomes, well, why stop now?
Dale Earnhardt putting that car on the beaches. I think that sent the message.
Yeah, no, definitely the Eastern Front was more important. But no, we did our part.
I was when he was like doing that thing. It's like he's like, I wish we, had this ready for the Nazis. I was kind of like, yeah, that would have been pretty tight.
So I want to compliment my theater because they didn't laugh at anything that was inappropriate.
Oh, my theater.
They laughed at all the appropriate times.
My theater was cracking up when he said he honeymoons there with his wife.
Really? See, my theater was, everyone was like disgusted. There were a lot of gasps.
Yeah.
My theater had a lot of like disbelieving laughter. Like you laugh because you can't believe what they're saying.
Well, and there's been all this controversy about not like giving enough attention to the victims, but I think a scene like that hits so hard because of how removed they are from the actual people on the ground. To come to that justification, we won't do it in Kyoto because of its significance, and I'd like to go there in the summer. It doesn't get more fucked up than that.
Or even the idea of like just having a strategy meeting of what city you're going to decimate, like weighing the pros and cons. Like, well, this is a big enough city, but it's not that important. Like, that's just icky, But yeah, I think, like you said, I mean, going into it, I didn't expect to like really see it like be detonated in Japan, but like, yeah, I feel like you kind of nailed it there, where it is like Oppenheimer's kind of perspective on the thing, and seeing his reaction and the way how callous some of the people were involved. I think that kind of hammers home that point. It is, and again, I think it's just a testament to Nolan and like his vision and way he wanted to structure the story.
Well, I'm so happy he didn't, because I'm sure you guys have heard this from your history teachers in public school. The amount of times I've heard that bombing be justified as, well, a land invasion would have killed even more American soldiers, Japanese soldiers, civilians, blah, blah, blah. I'm so glad that he didn't take that approach, because he could have. And I think a lot of people were worried that he would, that the ends do justify the means, because something even more horrible would have happened. I think
framing that with, with just the character of Oppenheimer, where he kind of battles with that too, it being kind of left a bit
yeah, he knows it's bullshit.
But like the ambiguity with that character and like what he actually believes, and what is he feeling remorse because he feels like he has to, or does he really believe he has blood in his hands? Does he believe that the ends justify the means? And did he do the right thing, and did he save, like you said, that argument of him saving people in battle? And they reiterated a couple times that, that we have to do this because the Japanese won't stop, but how much is that bullshit? And it really is just the way of showing all these complexities. And
well, that line by Groves too, dude, when he's like, somebody says, why would we drop 2? And he goes, we're going to drop 1 to show them that we can do it, and the second one to show them that we won't stop. And he's just angry by the questioning. He's just pissed off that somebody would even doubt their plan of action, that this is clearly the right thing to do.
But I also think, ending the movie, one, not at the end of Oppenheimer's life, but instead, and it's like cyclical, like we end the movie basically where we began it. And it's just Oppenheimer coming to terms with that they may not have detonated the atmosphere and destroyed the planet, but they might have done something just as equally horrible.
Yeah, I thought that.
And it's like,
sorry.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like the movie ends on that, and it leaves you quiet. Like my theater was silent at the end, and it's just like Cillian Murphy's like face looking at you, and it's like just all the weight of his regret, whatever he's feeling, however complicated it is, ultimately coming to the idea that he may have caused the exact thing that he was trying to prevent, and how would he move forward from that, and the idea that present day nuclear bombs are bad. It's truly like a new horror has been unleashed.
No, that was perfect.
And he has to grapple with that he's the one who unleashed it.
I think that's a line where it's kind of obvious, like when you think about it, like, oh, they're worried about the chain reaction and like the atmosphere, but in reality, the chain reaction is essentially the same thing. And I just thought that was a perfect way to like really put the nail in the coffin there, like, because that could come off as just like, all right, we get it, you're basically telling us what the movie was about and everything, but like, I think it just worked so well in that moment, and seeing that last shot of, like you said, his face, everything is weighing upon him. It really is just a perfect way to cap the movie, where you're kind of left in his shoes in that moment, like what is to come, the weight of his decisions on his shoulders, and what's going to come next. It really does, and it holds true to like us today. Like obviously, like we said, we know how that story went and how everything ended up today, but like the threat is still looming. You know, it's not something that's out of our lives. It's a major part of the current state of the world today, and it kind of leaves you with that uneasy feeling as well, because you just know where things are at and what could potentially happen, just having no control over it.
Yeah, it's just a Pandora's box.
I will say one critique is the way they introduced JFK, the way they said his name. People were making fun of it. It's like the same way they tease Robin in The Dark Knight.
That the whole like, oh, you know, a senator from Massachusetts very much read like a police clap.
It's like introducing the next Avenger. And they say Stephen Strange and Captain America.
Yeah, that Kennedy name, I don't know how much weight it has anymore, because the current Kennedy running he's an interesting fella. But JFK was, like I said, he was one of us, and that's why they killed him.
I would love to hear him say Oppenheimer in his Boston accent.
Oppenheimer. Something like that.
I think he nailed it.
Yeah, Florence Pugh. It was so funny when he kept bringing her the flowers, and she was like, "Can you please fucking stop doing this?" That was a real interesting add-in for those flashbacks, the black gloves, because there are a lot of conspiracies as to Jean Tatlock's death, that it could have been foul play, that she was murdered. But like I think Marissa, you said it, that it could be Oppenheimer putting the blame on him. Thinking, oh, I got her killed because of our associations.
Yeah, I think, you know, the inclusion of that hand is just enough to, you know, imply. It's like you don't need to do more than that in order to get across the point that like she may not, like, could she have killed herself? Yes. Could it have also been something else? Yes. She was she was a communist. Not that I, of course, know much about her in real life. I just know what Wikipedia told me. But, you know, we get the sense of the movie, it's like, to be a communist during that period, especially, and publicly, it was risky. And for someone like Oppenheimer, who was literally creating the nuclear bomb, again, like, you know, so many times where other people were telling him, it's like, just stop meeting with communists. Our lives would be easier if you stopped. And he was like, I just can't keep a good man down.
So he really liked the spread at the parties.
Yeah, he was like this charcuterie
He was
board.
like, one of them babysat my kid for months.
You're telling me that a communist could be so good with children? Not the communist that I know. Well, it's so funny too. Aaron made the point about the U.S. government going after communists, and it's like these people just wanted like people to have more job security. And they're like, well, I guess they want to destroy America. Time to destroy all their reputations. And also the idea that we'll use you when we need you, and then we'll discard you. When he's watching them chain up the bombs and taking them away, he had this idea in his head that it's their invention, and it's not. They own you. They own those weapons.
That was such a horrible shot.
Yeah, he thought he was going to be in the plane.
Right, yeah, no, and then he, at one point, he imagines himself in the plane, right? And that was more guilt. But he was like...
Yeah, but it was like the reality that like they're going to take this away and go do their thing, and he won't be able to see it. He won't know until they decide to tell him what happens. And then even then, he hears the broadcast first.
Right, yeah, so they don't even give him the heads up. He found out he got traded on Twitter.
No, but that shot...
His character, it's so funny.
The bomb's leaving, that was such a harrowing shot. And there were so many moments of that where, like, it did... Like, we talked about, like, the tension and the build-up with the score and the editing and all that all came together. But there are just some moments where, especially in IMAX, where the screen just opens up and you just... get everything, the whole landscape involved, and it just sends like kind of like chills down your spine. And that shot of the two bombs leaving, I thought, was pretty impactful, just because, like you said, it is that kind of like you kind of see that coming, but just the final realization that like everything is out of my hands, out of my control. And then, like Marissa said, just hearing it on the broadcast, not like being involved and just having basically everything just taken away from you and being like, yeah, you actually don't own this. And if we need you, we'll need you. And if we don't, you're nothing to us.
People have been making a lot of jokes about them making fun of Teller throughout the movie for wanting to build the hydrogen bomb.
But the shot of him when they go to watch the Trinity test and he's just slathering on the sunscreen,
Yeah.
that was kind of
No,
funny.
it was because he was the only one who enjoyed it instantly.
It also points to like how eccentric
Yeah.
he was, or how they because he's the one who kind of, because he testified in that kangaroo court hearing against Oppenheimer. Even Emily Blunt at the end, it's like she's not shaking his hand. She barely stops herself from spitting in his face.
Yeah, I read that actually happened, and like he was like pretty shook up about it. I'm like, good.
And in real life, it like really alienated him from the rest of the scientific community.
You know what, too? Like another appreciated part, or another thing I appreciated about the movie, especially like in the first hour or so, like it was like actually genuinely like pretty funny at times.
Yeah, I remember leading up to the movie, everyone was like, this is like horrifically depressing, and it was. But people were like, you're not going to crack a smile once. Like, there's nothing lighthearted about this. And when it's like a 3-hour movie, like you're expecting that it's a movie about the atomic bomb. But the moments of levity where they could get them were nice.
Especially, I think when he first got to the college and like set up his station, I thought those moments were like actually pretty fun.
Even though he did try to poison his tutor.
But that was funny too, when he takes it out of Kenneth Branagh's hand and throws it out.
I found that so funny that they actually included that, because when I read the book, I found it so funny that he was so petty enough to poison his teacher's apple for not really even doing anything to him, just like being kind of a dick. And he's like, I'm going to try to kill this guy. But you know who was great, dude? David Krumholtz as Robbie. He was a great presence throughout, being his little sidekick that makes sure he had a snack.
When you're building the atomic bomb, but you forgot to have a little snack.
He was, he reminded Oppenheimer of home. And this is, somebody else made this point on Twitter that, he can learn Dutch in a few weeks to give a lecture, but he doesn't know any Yiddish. So yeah, it's personal for him what's happening in Germany, but there is a detachment between his Jewish heritage, and that is something he struggled with throughout his life. So I think that speaks to, by the time Germany surrenders, that they're still going to push forward with it, because it's more about the finish line than it was anything personal or anything noble or what's right or wrong. It's about just finishing the job.
Well, I liked how I kind of got the sense that like the scientific community or the physicists in this movie, like they're kind of their own community without borders. Like they really don't. They do, but like in their own perfect world, like they don't adhere to regulations set to them by governments or anything. They kind of feel like they should operate with impunity in their own scientific community. And I feel like you kind of got that sense. It all comes full circle at the end with Rami Malek sticking up for Oppenheimer, and like how you said, they kind of ostracized Teller from that community. But like in their minds, in their own world, like objective science shouldn't have any rules when it comes to how they operate. But then obviously with, what they were actually building, that's when all that comes into play. But like for a lot of it, it just seems like Oppenheimer, like you said, there is a level of importance, and it feels like they're on like a countdown there. But I feel like when he's actually going and they're trying to create, like they kind of forget, maybe not forget, but like they're just doing it because they just love this world and discovery and what they're able to create. Yeah,
it could be easy to make something like that feel abstract when you're kind of buried in, the theoretical applications of all this science.
Right, you're so excited because you're making these breakthroughs and you're doing something that, you didn't know was possible before. But then, like, when you remove yourself from that, you realize what you're making and how it's going to be used, and ultimately everything that followed.
I wanted to make the point that I was so lost in the story that when Niels Bohr showed up at the Christmas party, I didn't think like, oh, that's Kenneth Branagh. I just thought, oh my God, Niels Bohr. They got him out of Denmark. Welcome to the team, buddy. And then he's like, no, I'm not playing. But so many great supporting characters. Like there's a Skarsgård in there, of course. The cast is big. There's going to be a Skarsgård as Hans Beta. I thought he was really good. Jack Quaid probably looks the most like his counterpart. I forget the name of the scientist that he played, Feynman. But if you look at pictures of Feynman, he actually did play the bongos. So that was a nice touch. But all throughout the cast, Matthew Modine, his character was great. We talked about Rami Malek bringing it all together there at the end. And Gary Oldman as Harry Truman. Now he's played 2/3 of the big three when it comes to Truman, Churchill, and Stalin. So I guess he still has to play Stalin in a movie, and then he could play all three of them together. But he was excellent as Truman. Similar to
I was wondering if they were never going to put Truman on screen, actually.
Do
because we get him so
voice.
late. Yeah.
And apparently that's exactly how that meeting went. That Oppenheimer was like, I feel like I had blood on my hands, and it just pissed Truman off so much that he hated Oppenheimer for the rest of his life.
Well, even before that, when he's like, well, what do you want to do now? He's like, oh, I guess we can give the land back to the natives. And the look on Truman's face was like, that's not happening, buddy.
He's like, oh, wow, I didn't know you were hilarious, too. Smart and funny. Yeah, and that's something else. People, it's become, I knew that people were it was going to become a controversy. Why aren't we putting more spotlight on the victims of the creation of the atomic bomb, or even the people that were pushed out of their homes in Los Alamos, or the victims of all the testing? I think the point is that what he unleashed on the world is that it was going to have a lot of horrible consequences. So I think that it's something where this isn't the responsibility of the movie, but I think a lot of people will watch this and they'll dig deeper into this era, and those consequences of these actions will become more prevalent to people.
Well, yeah, and also that's a whole nother movie. I feel I would much rather it be approached the way Nolan did than kind of try to push in like just 10 minutes of that and not really tell the full story, because that's just a lot. That's a whole story on its own,
Yeah, I agree. But overall, I think we all really enjoyed this movie.
Yeah.
I think it's a masterpiece, and to me, it's Nolan's second, right after the Dark Knight. I don't know if it's better than the Dark Knight, but second in terms of just now he's got two of these bad boys.
A lot of times when I see like great movies that I really, really love, sometimes I'm like a little hesitant to like really like right away be like, this is a masterpiece. This is one of the best. I kind of would like to sit on it, not try to be in the moment, like recency bias and things like that. I feel like immediately, like once I sat with it after seeing it, I'm like, yeah, this is an absolute masterpiece. One of the best movies I've ever seen.
And I wanted to make one last point. I think sometimes Nolan's movies visually they can be a bit cold, and at times maybe even stale. And I think this is the first time where he's really used texture and colors to evoke those sort of feelings and emotions in a way that is not always present in his films. And I think working with somebody like Hoyt van Hoytema, who's become one of the best cinematographers in the world, he's a legend in his own right, and also edited by Jennifer Lame, they really have helped him with his visual language. And I think that's what really contributes to it being a masterpiece too. I always say with biopics, they have to be movies first and then biopics second. And this is very much a movie first. So visually, narratively, special effects, acting, directing, it's his magnum opus. But The Dark Knight's better.
Yeah, it's a shame he had to include that JFK line.
You think that's what's keeping it being the best movie ever?
Yeah. No, it's definitely, the fact that it's a conversation just like is an achievement on its own, because like Dark Knight is obviously, I think, solidified now as, pretty much a perfect movie. So, the fact that I hold it right up there and you hold it right up there and many other people do as well, it's just a testament to what everyone involved was able to accomplish with this one.
Yeah, I really like the movie. I'm going to be thinking about it for a really long time. I might go see it again.
I want to. I can't wait for, a lot of people are saying like the every time something good happens, now studios are going to try to plan the next Barbenheimer.
I don't think that they could do this again. Especially if it was just a way for was it Warner Brothers to mess with Nolan? Is that what people are saying about
That's
it?
definitely an
Yeah, that's a
aspect to it.
conspiracy.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll be able to do it
It's
again.
crazy.
Because this is
Sometimes, like,
this is very much organic.
yeah, just like the greatest marketing strategies are just come by like through chance, because the way like both these movies just propped each other up is truly pretty remarkable.
Well said, guys. I think you both did very good on both reviews. So we were up for the Barbenheimer task, and I think we passed. But I guess that's up to the people listening at home. So comment below. What did you think about our reviews, and what did you think about the movies? Because it was a fun weekend at the old cinema before everything comes crashing down because of these goddamn fucking greedy ass motherfucking studios. All right, guys, that's it for this review. We're gonna wrap it up here, and yeah, we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Nerd Soup Podcast. As I said, comment your thoughts down below. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, do all those good things. And for Aaron and Marissa, I am Anthony J.Q. Nash, and many people have told me I look like the real life Oppenheimer.
Do you?
So go use the old Googles.
All right, well, I have to go. So
All right, Marissa, have fun.
See.
Thanks.
peace out. No problem.
All right, did the outro with Marissa. Okay, let me stop.
Wow, that was probably our best review yet. Hey guys, Aaron the Nerd Soup Monkey here with a brief shameless plug before we end the video. Do you ever feel like you don't have an adequate amount of nerd soup in your life? Like you're going to bed hungry and yearning for the nonsensical yet entertaining nutrients our podcasts provide? Well, we've come up with the perfect solution. The Nerd Soup Fan Question Podcasts, exclusively available to our Patreon supporters. You can sign up now by visiting patreon.com/nerdsoup, and for the price of only $1 per month, you'll receive exclusive access to our weekly podcast where we answer your questions that don't make it to the main show. And while you're there, you can check out the other rewards we offer to our patrons, like stickers, mugs, t-shirts, behind-the-scenes footage, and appearing in the credits at the end of our videos. And that's exactly what we're gonna do right now. Roll the names of the nerds who make Nerd Soup possible. The reason why the crypto crash didn't send our lives spiraling down a black hole of no return. Alright, I'll stop talking so you can listen to this jazzy-ass music while checking if Bo spelt your name wrong in the credits.